Hi, I'm Brad Hutchings. This is the Break It Down Show with Pete A. Turner.
Boom. Brad's been on enough times I don't even have to coach him on what to say to start the show, which is a fun thing. And honestly, Brad, a bit of a KPI, like to have done this so long and have people know the show, right? It's a real neat thing. And in this day and age, it's really fucking tough to stand out. But in my own little way, the Break It Down show, the thing I started over 10 years ago with John Leon Guerrero, still
Yeah.
around. It still does
Look,
things. Pretty incredible, right?
look, man, it's the West Sacramento A's hat you got there. I hate on the local news lately how they call them the MLB A's. That's Steve Hartman on Channel 5, KTLA. They're the MLB A's. He doesn't want to call them the West Sacramento A's as they issued a press release demanding to be called this year.
Yeah. Well, they will behave because there are laws, and if they want to participate with Major League Baseball, all
Yeah.
they have to do is write that letter and like knock that shit off, right?
Yeah.
There's all kinds of instances where these things have happened, and you ultimately have to say the thing. They don't lean too hard on the stadium names, so
Right.
whatever it is, Soldier Field is Soldier Field. It can be Soldier Field presented by Citibank, but no one's going to say that shit, right? But the announcers do, and usually the news does too, because there's a professionalism that goes with that. Like, this is what these guys are called. It's like when people say Lady Antebellum. No, they say Lady A. They respect the fact that the band has changed their name, and they say it, right? Some people may not do it, but that it smacks of a lack of professionalism. It is X, not Twitter. Now, you might have to say the word Twitter to clarify what you're talking about, because X is not a very descriptive name, but you shouldn't have to lead with X, formerly Twitter, right? You should just say X and then let us figure it out, especially if there's a link. So I don't know. Some of these things, are they all that important? If someone is going to be petty, I don't know.
Have you read my tweets lately?
No, I've never read your tweets today.
We don't know what to do with that, Pete. Like, you can change the name, but it's like all the tradition around it. It's kind of tough to get mind share for that.
For sure, right? And so, like, when it comes to the A's, there's a lot of people that are just shitty, and that's a them problem,
right?
And I don't really care about their problems. Yeah, I do jump in when they say things that are false, and they want to spread false narratives. But right now, and this is going to bring it. Watch me segue us into AI. Right now, if I go to Grok and I ask about the A's and the condition thereof, it'll be negative because there's enough bitching about
pretty
what the A's are.
It's negative stuff. Yeah.
Right. When in reality, hell of a young team, right? And a young team can be a chaotic team. All teams lose at least 4. It's very rare. Maybe you know this, maybe you don't know this. It is very rare, exceedingly rare, like once in a generation rare for a team to lose no more than 3 games in a row in a season. So like 3 is the low limit. All teams do that several times throughout the year. They really all lose 4 to 5 commonly, several times throughout the year, because that's just fucking baseball. And so everybody sees a nadir and they think that's the answer. Like, no, that's the nadir. There's the team's going to go up. It's going to go down. Players do the same thing. We lose track of these things because I don't know why.
Well, because we're consistent day-to-day human beings. Our performance is consistent day-to-day. Pete, have you ever had a bad show? No. You have consistently 95% shows. That's what you have every single time. I mean, I just show up and I know it's going to be a 95 because that's what you do.
Yeah. Literally, when we started, and I don't use adverbs very often, but one of the things we said was, let's just get a dribbling ball through up the middle. That's a base hit. It's ugly, but you know what? Dude's on first. And that was sort of like the goal. It's like that one wasn't a stinker. Guys on first, good enough. Yeah. Because it's easy to be hard on yourself when you're creating something and be like, that's not perfect, right? So let's just get a duck snort. Let's run out a swinging bunt. Swinging bunt's about the most emasculating hit you could have in baseball, where you caught the seam of the ball, pound it in the ground, and you just ran your ass.
Yeah. Or getting brushed on the back of the thigh. I'd say that's probably the most embarrassing way to get on base.
Right.
Yeah.
So when it comes to AI, I just had a show earlier this week where I had Grant Martin on and Nick Frazier, right? And these guys are Green Berets, in Grant's case, former, but They want us to fight better. And the
Mhm.
current administration is like, we want to be a lethal force, right? And
Mhm.
so there's this, above everything, above the AI, there's this push and pull as to what does the military do? You
Mhm.
know, at its essence, yes, the military breaks things, kills people, takes over land, and then does something next, right? But the reality is we do things all the time because we don't want to be in a constant state of full scale war. And so we do
Right.
things, and we talked a little bit about this in the episode with Nick and I about low level conflict, low intensity conflict, you know, all these things that help make the battlefield even more complex than it is, even on the battlefield. Someone like Scott Husing in his book, you know, his Marines will go to a place in town and they'll stay the night in someone's house uninvited. They just knock on the door. It's a lot of Marines. And guess what? They're going to come in and they're going to stay the night in your house. And so you're
Which
stuck with it. So as much as we want to say,
Which amendment is that? No quartering.
yeah, right.
Yeah.
All of them. All of
Mhm.
them.
Right.
So yeah, you're forced to house troops, right? And that's a great point. So when we think about like what we want to do and what we get to do, these are different things. So when we think about the future, and we've posited this in the other episode, like in the early mid 90s, laptops, digital cameras, these things were new to be able to move around with the computer. I mean,
Yeah.
in our lifetimes, think about what a computer was to what it is now. It's remarkable. So help me understand a little bit about, I don't know, the pace of technology, how AI fits into things. I remember when everybody was going to have a computer and they were $10,000. Then someone said, how about a clone? And no one ever says the word clone anymore, right?
Right. PC clone. Yes. You know, so we have this fairly new technology, which is these language models. We call them large language models because they are big models. They are gigabytes in size, tens of gigabytes, hundreds of gigabytes. And what we found is that the they they can they could reasonably carry on a conversation with us, something that looks like a conversation, and they, there seems to be enough. This is sort of the discovery of them. There seems to be enough information, knowledge embedded just in our language, how we talk, that a lot of interesting things can be created with them. And you know, if you've ever had to talk off the cuff about something you don't know about, like, you know, today I come in here and I'm babbling with you about the A's, only knowing that they sent out a press release about West Sacramento. You know, I did okay until you accused me of bunting it up the, you know, off the bat to get a single. Okay, you know, whatever. But but you know, we do that too. So this isn't
Mhm.
this isn't unfamiliar territory to us, that arranging words and, you know, whatever word salad we want sometimes can sound kind of intelligent. That's great.
Mm.
So we do that. And you know, when we made this discovery, and it's kind of the first time that people have seen this, you know, the computers could really keep a conversation with human beings. Everybody went all in. Everybody said, well, if we can do this, then, you know, it can replace people. We can get to this thing called AGI, where the computer is smarter than a human being, or smarter than all human beings put together, and then we can somehow leverage that to make the human condition better. You know, a whole religion has come down upon us, and people talk about AI as if, hey, it's the expert, it knows everything. You know, when
Mhm.
we go and we test that, and we find out, you know, that's not really true. It's not really true at all. It's not. It's fallible. It's very fallible. Um, Looking at AI as a black box, these LLMs as a black box, you know, we find out it's not good at, you know, getting us an obscure fact like today's median debut baseball player. Not gonna do it.
Right.
You know what I found today? I I thought you know, Shohei has hit a few home runs lately, and I remember the last time I sort of checked in, Aaron Judge was atop the leaderboard with 18 home runs, and so I thought, okay, I'm going to go ask Grok, and I'm going to ask Chat GPT, who's the current leader, you know, in home runs. That should be easy to find, right? It's a stat that's probably everywhere. And what I found is that both referenced stories that had a Grok reference story that had a chart in it, and it was up to date. I forget who number 2 is right now. He's some dude I'd never heard of before. I kind of want to make fun of his name, but I can't remember it off the top of my head. But that guy's got 19 home runs. Judge has 18, and of course Shohei has 20. So then I asked ChatGPT through Bing Copilot, and its answer, and this was referencing a CBS News story that was already a day old, was Shohei had 20, and Judge and this other guy both had 18. So it was actually incorrect, but it had a reference, and that was its answer this morning, which was incorrect. And I thought, damn, if it can't even get that right, because it's not looking up, of course, it's not looking up the actual stats. It's looking for some article that it has access to that's late enough in its, we're in its training or wherever else, that it can reference and pull that stuff out of and generate an answer. And if it's not pulling the right thing, it's not generating the right answer.
Yeah.
Getting
Yeah.
back to your median player, if somebody wrote a story for CBS News, SportsWire, or whatever, CBS Sports, every day about who the median debut player was that morning, Grok would be phenomenal with that question. And ChatGPT would be a couple days behind, apparently.
Right.
Right?
Yeah. I mean, the timeliness of the information, and as always, the quality of the information.
Yeah, and has it been written about? Because that's how these things
Right.
process. Is they process things that have been written, not just the raw facts themselves.
If you had a Joker site that was constantly pushing out MLB falsehoods, right?
Yes.
And you did that, you would be part of the dialogue. Just because Rolling Stone puts out the 500 best whatevers doesn't mean that that's a fact. That's just,
Right.
just an opinion piece for us to start a conversation. So if you did something like that and you just put out the wrong information about everything, maybe you'd be tagged it's a wrong information site, right? Maybe.
Right.
But there is the preponderance of information, of opinion, is what it seems that LLMs latch onto.
Actually, I'd narrow it a little bit more, and I would say the preponderance of expressions. And there's this really cool thing I found today, and it was I do follow a few IP attorneys on LinkedIn, and I'm connected with a few. And why? Because I find them absolutely fascinating, whether they're doing copyright or they're doing patents or whatever else. This is a specialty that is grounded in the reality of law, and your feelings about how things should be do not count. If there was a guy, he's a patent attorney, and he was writing about how he had this great video of this guy riding a horse on the moon, and the best part of this video, this is preposterous. This guy in a spacesuit riding a horse on the moon, right? This is preposterous, kicking up dust and whatever else, and the dust kind of behaves like there's like Earth-like gravity on the moon. And then in the background is this giant Earth, and yeah, maybe that's the way you imagine it, but when you're on the moon, the Earth it's tiny.
Speck, yeah.
It's very little, right? And it's certainly not 3/4 of the horizon rising up over, it's not. And even I guess the even better part is on the moon, like we have things when they're on the horizon and they rise up, is they're larger because the light it's refracted through the atmosphere. Well, the moon has no atmosphere, so there's none of that, right? So it's going to be the actual, object on horizon is actual size. That's the label they need to have for the moon, right? So he had this great thing, and he used it as sort of a setup for AI is pretty incredible at like the visualizations you can get, sort of the details and stuff, right? But like on the plot, it doesn't know what's up. And he talked about how he's used all these systems that are aimed at patent attorneys to help them write a patent application. And they put the giant shine on the turd, but they don't get the claims right. And the point of a patent application is you have to get the claims right. The expression of what you're trying to do is you're trying to you're trying to get legal protection for an idea, but in order to get legal protection for the idea, you have to express the idea, and you have to express it in a detailed mechanical way, right?
Yeah.
And these machines don't do that because that kind of thing is not embedded in our language. And so I thought that was a really interesting. Here's the
It
reason
is
I thought it was
interesting.
it's an interesting
Yeah.
point that LLMs work on expressions of ideas. They do not work on the ideas themselves. And go ahead, Pete. Fill me in here.
No, I was going to add to that and say when you write an academic grade paper, something that's going to be peer reviewed or editorial board reviewed, something like that, you have to speak to your knowledge of the existing body of work, right? You have to do a lit review. Have to. Yeah.
Right. Let's hope that's what's going on. You know, now we find a lot of papers where they have references that are absolute garbage. They're made up.
Yeah.
The description of the reference is made up and inaccurate. And
Well, I was going to say, at some level, there's a little bit of like Islamic style writing, like praise be Allah, because Allah is the one worthy of being praised. So let's make sure we praise Allah. You know, you say this like every 10 words, right? So you don't forget. And so there is this lit review that you use, right? And so maybe you've read the abstract. Hopefully you've read all of it, internalized it, read the subsequent side of things and that, you know, and you've got a real mastery of this body of work.
yeah.
But you have to 100%, even if you don't read those things, you have to include the relevant texts, especially if one of your reviewers wrote that text.
Right. And then,
So,
then it's important that you characterize it correctly because your reviewers are very familiar with it and you're trying to characterize it in a way that demonstrates your mastery of it. Again, the expression of the ideas is different from the ideas themselves.
Yeah. And I'm going to say right now that LLMs can't do that, right? So they might be able to access some of the articles in the relevant body of work.
Yeah.
But I wouldn't say reliable. I wouldn't want to bet my PhD on it. You know, it would be on me to read these things and process.
They play in expression space. They do not play in idea space. And unfortunately, what has to happen with these things is that the expressions have to flow from ideas. They don't just stand on their own. And that's where we have.
And so this gets us in over to the analysis space that we want. And I'm desperate for this to work out, that we want LLMs to do for us, you know, to summarize something or to help me take 6 hours of patrol events recorded and then tell me, what did I experience today? What are the relevant points? I mean, it's my job to know this stuff, but okay, great. This robot is going to help me do it. But I don't think it can, because there's so much nuance in there. And even still, like this robot here, the StreamYard robot, and thanks to StreamYard for having this thing, it cuts up and makes these AI clips, which I now post without proofing at all, because you know, it doesn't matter. Look, the robot just picks stuff and I'm just like, good enough, because they're often awful. Sometimes it just has like not even a picture that's on this screen. It finds this picture of me. Oh, you know what? It's in my YouTube account. It's my YouTube image with my black red 6 hat on. And it's a picture that hasn't been relevant to me in years now, right? And it'll put that in as the static picture instead of just my face, which is right now why these are the choices that it makes, right? And this is a pretty good robot. And then it'll, instead of cutting off where the thought ends, it'll bring you in. You'll say, you know, another thing about that, and it'll cut that right there, right? And maybe that's clever. But I don't think so.
I had quite a brainstorm of ideas because you had texted me last night and said, hey, can we do a show tomorrow? And I thought, okay, well, I'll talk with Pete about him sometime this morning. And I just started writing them down. And one of them that came to me was, you know, the old those who can't teach expression, right? And I think the more you think about it, the more you realize that teaching is a discipline, and yet it's a discipline all itself, and yet the statement is awfully true. It's too true to ignore. Okay. So I'm gonna spin that one a little bit, and I'm gonna say those that can't automate. And I was thinking, you know, I worked for a company that all we did was automate stuff. Worked for them for 8 years recently, and probably the most frustrating thing about that is I was a I'm just gonna flat out say, and they can disagree because they hate me. I was the
Mhm.
star performer with customers, whether that be getting customers to, like pre-sales, getting them to understand what we do, whether it was during ramp up with a customer, getting them to understand what they had to contribute to the process to, to make it work, what we could do for them and stuff. And then like implementing their automations, to make their product demos work well. Um, I would consider myself the star player on that team for at least the last 5 years, if not 6.
Mhm.
A little ramp
Mhm.
up there, a little bit of, people, kind of feeling out roles and whatever else and sort of seeing where I could fit in. But I would say at least 5 of the 8 years, absolutely the star player on that team. One of the fun activities that happened every year was people who did not talk to customers or did not like talking to customers would come in and examine what I did and then go and rewrite it or optimize it or automate it or whatever they thought they had to do. How often do
Right.
you think what they turned around actually worked and didn't cause me more work?
Right. No, I
None.
mean it doesn't happen, and this is where like we have similar backgrounds in this, and I would be the star player for the army, and I
Mm-hmm.
would work to try to connect those things together. And the army doesn't want to do things that work. They want to do things that they are part of their doctrine, and then their own
Right.
personal belief about how the doctrine should be deployed. And so I would try to figure out how to lever these things so they kind of communicate it, and
Yeah.
if I'm going to use a technology term, it's like I've got a cat 20 cable, but I'm running through one little piece of copper that can't
Right.
barely push any data across it, because that's the best we can do in this case. And if I don't do that, maybe someone or some other thing will try to emulate that, but it's very hard to do. It's also very easy to chop that wire and be like, get Turner out of here because he brings a lot of bad news, right? So
Yeah.
dudes like that, folks like that try to communicate across these chasms tend to be bad news people, tend
Uh-huh.
to say, hey, that won't work. And when you point out the path, they're like, oh, that's fucking hard. Yeah, but it's not, it's the critical path. So
Right.
yes, it's
This is
hard.
important. This is the important feature here. You have to do this. Oh, well, that looks too difficult. We're not doing it. And,
Right.
related to those who can't automate, in my mind, I get it very confused with, I had to go look at that to make sure that was what I was going to say. I get it confused with
Mm,
those who can't optimize. And
mm,
everybody thinks optimization is the greatest thing. Everything has to be optimal. And, in computer science and software, 30 years ago, we're joking at fools over premature optimization. And we're
yeah.
joking at them in the sexual sense. Like these people cannot control their urges to like finish too early. Like that's really
Right.
what it's about. And like that's what we meant. That's like what we went right after their manhood because all they could
Mm,
do is they couldn't think about solving the problem. They could only think about solving the problem optimally.
yeah. Yeah.
Don't do that. You got to get this thing working first and then we can start to talk about,
Right.
right?
Yeah. Yeah. And there are, I want to back out. There are instances where I can see whatever the current form of AI will help us to understand something, right?
Mm-hmm.
But so much of it has to be experienced. Combat is a very complex thing, and I'm saying
Yeah.
combat in all of its styles and ilks and everything. The rule here isn't the rule there. By the way, they just think about it in terms of England and how different all of the different accents are.
Mm-hmm.
And you're like, I'm 5 miles away, and this person's talking in a way that I totally different than the person by that chapel over there, right? And so, just imagine that and trying to map that in understanding what combat is, and then layer it 10 layers deep of that, where
Pete,
it's just this Plinko board, three
Pete,
dimensional. It's impossible to
just
predict.
just think about all the regional dog breeds of the UK.
Yeah,
I was trying to
right.
think of I had a witty tweet on X. There we go, tweet on X. I had a witty
Mm-hmm.
tweet on X going after King Charles for blessing the lands and acknowledging the old landowners of Canada. As he their official head of state goes and visits their parliament, right?
Right.
And I was trying to think of the right thing to say. And do I call him a corgi fucker? and it turns out that was the right thing, but I had to go look that up, right, to make
Mm,
sure that I got the breed right, just with his. But if you're going to talk about these people, you got to talk about which accent they have. Is it a Cockney accent? Is it whatever?
plummy, whatever, right? All
Right,
the
right,
accents. Yes.
right. I just had that at the
Yeah.
top of my head, but yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's really complicated. And those things are really important. Like that was important for me to get the joke right and land the joke,
Hmm.
right? Well, if you go in and you just say, "Hey, we'll just put some random dog breed," now the joke doesn't
Right.
land. It's not funny. It's optimal,
Right.
maybe.
Right. Right. Yeah, optimal. So what I want to do, right? Because I don't have the science and the art that you have from your degrees, because you guys have built a discipline all around this stuff, by the way. And you're always
Yeah,
like, we've known this 30 years. We've
yeah,
thought this through. There's a whole philosophy to computer science, right?
yeah.
And of course there is. Of course there is, right? So when we look at a concept like ethics and the ethics of using AI in a combat zone, one of the things that Nick and Grant and I talked about was we don't want robots saying, beep, I will kill that. Beep. That's a pretty big barrier. Just like we don't have, we grew up in the Bay Area. We have a thing called BART. And there's still someone in those trains, hasn't needed one in 50 years, right? For the most part, it would have ran exactly the same without that person. But we all want that person to be up there, even if they're not doing anything, even if they're just high as fuck and they're just like, whatever, I have to stand here. We need a person, a human there to say, no, for real, stop. No, for real, wait, don't smash that person with the door and take off. All these things that we can think of that may or may not actually happen. But we want a human
override the
there.
automatic stuff, and then
Right.
should there be an emergency or whatever else, maybe the guy's trained that he can help evacuate or
Right.
do what they need to do or move people to the right side of the right into the train or whatever else. Like he's in control, he can look at the situation, he can do it. Whereas we don't have circumstances like that enough to automate,
Right.
to plan for.
That's a good point.
You lose communication with the train. I mean, then somebody in a control center can't do that either.
Right. Right. So when we think about all of the things that we want to try to control for, and one thing that does work well, right? And there's a lot of AI that already exists, that already does things. We're just calling it AI now, right? But all posts, when you deploy in a massive environment, they have a thing called, and I'm using one term for a lot of things, but they have a thing called a phalanx. And it's like an R2D2 with a gun, and burp, it shoots. And if something's coming in, it'll just vomit out a bunch of lead and kill that thing. And so if you come in at the right vector, right speed, there'll be a voice, incoming, incoming, incoming. And you have about 5 to 10 seconds to get somewhere and hide, right?
Right.
But it's a dumb machine. It's smart in that it recognizes it. Then it says it to the whole camp. So everybody's like, ah! And then we all get down on the ground. And then you're like, I didn't even hear anything. Do I lay on the ground all day? What do I do, right? And then accompanied with that is that R2D2, and it shoots out a whole bunch of rounds, and then it hits that thing and usually blows it up, right? So that's a great use of an automated system that's ever vigilant. You don't have to pay someone to just, didn't happen this time, and then just watch a screen, right?
Right. I mean,
it's automated.
I blink for too long or have a little headache or whatever else, our base is wiped out. Yeah, that's no good.
Yeah, or if I get sleepy or whatever, right?
Right.
So in the places that have it, that is a very good use of an automated intelligent system that helps us to get those things. And it is so successful that when I come in, again, spy, and I'm like, hey, a round just came in and nothing happened. No warning, no response. And they're like, no, a round didn't come in. Okay. It did. That's why I'm in here talking to you. It's that, and they believe it so fully that you say, no, for real, check your radar or whatever, but something just came in and it landed over yonder, right? And then they're like, I don't think so, and they're like reluctant to, this really happened. They're reluctant to look it up. And then ultimately they're like, you guys were right. Something did came in. It just missed the camp. It's slightly over. It's a small camp, right? Slightly overflew us, but it hit our area, and it should have responded, right? So even the machine that's automated still makes mistakes.
Let's identify something and put a pin in it. Maybe for this talk or another talk or whatever else. That's a case where automation gives you net new capability. Right? You do not have that capability to, Like you can't structure that with human beings. What are you going to do? Like 500 people at at stations next to each other, hoping that 100 are looking at any one time, and some voting system where if enough of them hit the button, then it goes off and does what it needs to do, and how to aim it, how to track it, whatever else. This is beyond the capability of human being to work in that short amount of time. And so the automation there gives you a net new defensive capability, right? That makes a lot of sense, right? Yeah. And like, I forget which guest was which on your show, but the guy who works for the he works for the DoD agency that's evaluating these AI things.
Mm-hmm.
Again, I forget which name.
Is that Nick, or was that somebody else?
Well, on the show a couple of days ago, so there were two of them. Who did we have?
Grant, that's Nick. Yeah,
that's Nick.
That's Nick Frazier.
Yeah. So Nick was talking about kind of looking at things that work at scale. I hate the word at scale, but just imagine a lot of computers, a lot of inputs, a lot of outputs.
Right.
And then he's sort of looking at, hey, are there commercial technologies that can be applied here for things at scale? Well, things at a certain scale are things that a human company can't do, or a group of people can't do. They're big enough problems that they're going to take too long to have an organization find the answer to them. And so, so yes, if it's one of those kinds of problems, we should be looking at automating from the beginning. We should be looking at, trying to be efficient about it from the beginning so that we can scale more, maybe not full optimization, but we should be looking at those things because those are features that make it possible. They're enabling features. They're not crafted on in order to cut costs or, cut people or whatever else.
Right. I'm not in any way trying to beat on Nick because he's got a very challenging job in a dynamic that always changes. So new president, new way to go, new general in charge, new way to go. Like there's a lot of bosses in the military and they will tell you to do opposite things or tell you to do things with a certain kind of handcuffs on your hands. So let's understand that about Nick. It's huge respect. The guy's brilliant. He's highly educated. So when we talk about these things, I want him to be right too. And it is a super smart approach in the military to look at off the shelf packages, right? Because when I was, just becoming a spy, we some dudes like us went out and said, can't we just go over there and buy a fucking laptop off the shelf, buy a little small scanner, buy a little small printer. The printer was like, I don't know, it was this big, right? It was tiny. And buy a digital camera. A digital camera? Well, we have to have a green room. Like, no, you don't have to have a developing room. You just buy a camera and you plug it into your computer and it will show what? Mine's blue, right? And so these dudes built this system by just saying we need whatever it was, $10,000 to buy this thing, which honestly is a bargain for the amount of capability you got. And so the off-the-shelf thing, it does work, right? And a lot of times our software stuff is so ponderous. You're just like, what is the solution? It tries to be everything, and so it's nothing, right? I'm sure you know about that. So anyhow, so I guess I appreciate what Nick is trying to do because there's a ton of brilliance and things that might create a new capacity. When we discussed it on my show, if you had something to record the entire conversation that I just had so you could go back and review it. Boy, that would be interesting, right? Do I have time to go back and listen to that whole thing? Probably not, right? Not. But if I could feed it into a machine and get some kind of synopsis, even if it's not all that accurate, whatever it was, or if I wanted to remember a note and I was like, oh, right around here, like if I could say time mark this or something like that, right? These things would potentially reduce the amount of time it took me to produce a report.
Yeah. Summarizing doesn't work with LLMs. It doesn't. It can't. It won't. I'll tell you the most interesting thing I thought about your show with Nick and what was the other guy's name? Grant, yeah. Grant. I was pitched by a very, very good friend on a summarizing application idea last week, couple weeks ago. And, I looked at it and I thought, okay, absolutely wonderful idea. But what's going to happen when the summaries are wrong? Because the summaries are going to be wrong. and all
Right.
of that, we could buy all the Indians in the world to work on the technology. It will never be right. Not with this technology, not with
Mhm.
LLMs. Like this is that problem, going back to expressions and ideas. And
Mhm.
LLMs deal in expression space. They do not deal in idea space. In order to do a summary, what I need to do is I need to extract the ideas from the expression. And then what I need to do is I need to compress the ideas or write a smaller expression of those ideas. That's how summarization works. And yet I don't have anything that works in idea space.
Mhm.
Like, there's your proof right there that summaries will not work. Now, there are papers dedicated to, all sorts of metrics for how they measure, how well summaries work in certain,
Yeah.
certain situations. And, they have their data structured some particular way that makes it more amenable to working in expression space and word space. And it gives kind of good summaries. But in general, like, this is where I back up, and I back up to the computer science. I just say, look, it doesn't work. It's like, if we're
Mm.
gonna if we're gonna you know if we're gonna market a product and say that it works for this, maybe we don't get sued, but we're gonna get laughed at because it doesn't work.
Mm.
It's like, people are gonna figure out this doesn't work. It's kind of like, Pete, your clip thing from StreamYard. Love it,
Yeah.
but you've been telling me for a year, how do I make this thing work better? What do I do with it? And I'm like, yeah, you can't, because
Yeah.
it's not dealing in idea space. It's dealing in transcript expression space. That's what it's dealing with. And timestamp space, where
Yeah.
words are. It gets the mechanics right, but it doesn't get the ideas right.
I just took, while you were talking, I
Yeah.
jumped into my YouTube account and I grabbed um, a link from
Uh-huh.
an episode, right? And I just put that episode into Grok. That's all I did,
Uh-huh.
right?
Right.
And I didn't say summarize. I just put it in there. Choop! Because Grok is not smart and is in fact not truth seeking, it gave this answer. The link you provided for us is a YouTube live stream entitled Elon Musk's 2025 Tesla event, news, Cybercap, Optimus, robot, and more by the Tesla Space, streamed on October 10th, 2024. Yeah. All of that is
Yeah.
false.
Yeah, of
It
course.
continued to go on, and it was in no way accurate because, and I'm going to put the link just so you guys, that is the link that I shared. You're welcome to click on that link and do whatever you want with it. It's going to take you to my show.
Yeah.
So not only did it not summarize, it didn't even give you the facts of the fact that that's Nick, Grant, and I talking about AI, right? And
Yeah.
and those words aren't any, and there is that is in the description of that show, right?
Yeah,
So
but I mean, it's not even pulling that down. It's like looking at it. It looks at
it didn't,
https youtube.com/live, and it's sort of
right?
connecting that too. Every time anybody's talking about this, it's with,
And I'm going to
Elon's
post into the remarks here
cyber taxi.
the,
Yeah.
the text, right? And so it's a little bit long, so it's in a couple of
Oh,
them
I see.
things, but that just happened right there. And if
Yeah.
I was to say summarize it, it's probably going to go with this fantasy about
Yeah.
Tesla and robots and that kind of thing. Pretty
Yeah.
crazy, right? And so
Yeah.
I want to take this and I want to tell it to go collate these reports or any reports on a guy named Muhammad Ali Muhammad and tell me what he's been doing the last 48 hours.
Yeah.
That ain't happening, man. There's
That's
no
not
way that's
happening.
happening.
Nah, you need a better data structure and a good way to query that data structure. There's a lot of hope, getting back to kind of Nick's hopefulness about things, that we can, in
Yeah.
fact, he mentioned this, is that maybe LLMs can be the UI, the user interface for things. That's a
Mm-hmm.
we can talk to them, and then somehow they can go and do the right work, not just
Right.
talk back to us, and parrot things back to us that they think that we want to hear.
Right.
And I I think there's a lot of hope about that too. At the same time, um, when we need a user interface for something, what as a user interface designer, from the beginning of computer systems, what I'm thinking of, what I'm trying to think of doing is I'm trying to think of the clearest way on the screen for you to specify something the clearest way for whatever has to happen on the back end to happen the way that you intended. Right? So you have an intention, you're going to express it by doing some things on the screen. Maybe they're settings, maybe they're typing things in, maybe whatever else. And then I'm going to take those expressions of your intent and I'm going to feed that to the algorithms for processing. And to think that, you know, human language with all of its, you know, all of its nuance, all of its what's the word where things mean this, but they ambiguity, for all its ambiguity, for all this other stuff, like, you know, ambiguity is like this serious computer science problem. Like when we design languages, you know, for programming and stuff like that, we are trying to eliminate ambiguity. We're trying to eliminate duplicate ways, or at least we used to try to eliminate duplicate ways of saying the same thing, so that there was a you know, an easy preferred way of expressing the same thing. Like that was a feature of a language, that we get rid of duplication, we get rid of ambiguity. And when you have that, you know, how do I get your intent? And again, these systems do not deal with intent. They deal with expressions of intent. Just like they don't deal with ideas. They deal with expressions of ideas. And I think that's the, while it would be nice to think, hey, maybe the next version will deal with intent. Well, the next version will not deal with intent, because these models, they don't deal with intent. It's like I have a water sprayer, you know, in the kitchen for coffee beans, and I wish it were an oil sprayer, you know, for deep fry or for air fryer, right? It's not an oil sprayer, it's a water sprayer. I need to go find an oil sprayer to spray the deep fry, the air fry stuff, right? It's a different tool. We don't have that tool right now.
So while you were talking,
yes,
and because I want to make sure that we illustrate that I'm on the side of this technology working, right?
Yeah.
But we're taking very obvious things. Okay, so maybe my show from earlier this week isn't searchable, and we're just using Grok in this case, and I am in the middle of talking to you and trying to pay attention.
Yeah.
But it could not reliably, and instead of saying, "Man, that shit's too new for me," instead of just being truth-seeking, I can't access that video. It invented some shit that was completely
Pete, if you took the information from that video or the transcript from that video and you pasted it into Grok, you put it in what's called the context window, right? Yeah. It would be able to do amazing things with it. That's what it's trying to do. That's what it should be trying to do, by the way, when you give it the link, which is find relevant stuff to bring into the context window so that it can start, you know, predicting an answer that's relevant.
Now let's push a little harder, and not any harder like for you and I, but let's just push a little harder. So back in the olden times, I thought, oh, you know, I'll start myself a blog and I'll write about combat and everything like that. And I did. And that site is still up. It's called Queso Paper. And so while we were chatting, I typed in summarize Queso Paper. It did not work. It did not work. This is a site that's well over 10 years old, right?
Yeah.
And so, and look, I'm in charge of Queso Paper, so I know it's there.
Did you spell queso right? How's it spelled? I would have gone
Quesopaper, because I'm the one that fucking named it, right? And
yeah, so that's a pretty unique name. I mean,
it's a pretty unique name.
Yeah.
Quesopaper.com. You can go quesopaper.com right now and you'll find that blog site. And I don't care if you go there. I'm just saying you can find that, right? And then it's like, oh, this is a fan fiction page for Adventure Time. Now, it is possible I might have once mentioned Adventure Time. I doubt it. I do like Adventure Time, but it's never a thing I've written about publicly, you know, other than maybe crack some jokes or something. But it goes on for, I don't know, you know, a couple hundred words about Adventure Time and Adventure Time fans. And that is not what quesopaper.com was about, right? So it's, here was a chance for it to get old information, over 10 years old, and do something with it. And it could not do it, right? So I'm supposed to assume that it's going to take past patrol reports from a given region and give me an answer that's realistic. I don't know how it does that. And if they can't handle that, what can it handle?
If you have source material that you need to be used as a direct reference, you have to make sure that the source material ends up in the context window. That's where it's going to have the most effect. If it's just in the training, whether that be the base training, whether that be the instruct training. Um, it's going to move the weights, but it's not going to have that effect. Now, here's an experiment I think it would be cool if we could perform right now, but I'm not screen sharing and I'm not prepared to do it, so it would be clunky and take too much time.
Right.
But what we could do is we could have the Mojo Knowledge Appliance write about queso paper, and we let it go for a paragraph or so, and when it says like maybe it comes up with something like, what was it called, Big Adventure or something like that? What was that called?
Adventure Time.
Adventure Time, right? Well, we could like back up to the point where it's going to talk about something. We could say, yes, it was an offshoot of Adventure Time, right? And then we could say, hey, complete your answer from here. And that's the completion model versus the chat model, of course. It gives you a little bit more flexibility with that. And it would come up with some story about how, it's based on Adventure Time. Like we nudged the iceberg with a couple of words. They're in the context window, and as it's generating it's going to double down on that. So you imagine this thing generating an answer, through what we're using Grok there. You imagine Grok generating an answer. Grok comes up to blah, 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 blah. It puts Adventure Time. Now suddenly Adventure Time, it's in the context window for future tokens being generated. It's going to affect that a lot. So it kind of like shoots down this alley and this alley and this alley. It finds something to hang on to, and now it's way down that alley. It's all in on that alley, whether that was a good choice or not. That's kind of the interesting thing about use LLMs to explore word spaces, and I don't mean I mean just like the space around a word or a phrase or whatever. What a great use. Now that's not going to get you anything factual, but it's going to get you all these related things and write sentences about them that are coherent, that kind of bring them together. An expression of an idea, it doesn't really know what the idea is.
Right. Yeah, and we got a lot. We covered that quite a lot on the episode with Nick and Grant. About, and I think this is where folks struggle, and I struggle in this area too, where I forget that Grok and all of its friends are not truth-seeking. They don't work in fact space very well. They may present you a fact, but it can't reliably present you facts. And so, like while we were talking, I asked it a very hard question, for a human, but probably an easy question for a robot. If LLMs work, and I said, summarize for me the Green Berets project. And it's like, oh, you're talking about this Islamic dude and everything else. And I got it totally wrong. And fair enough. That's really fucking hard, right? Because I'm also writing in a foreign language, but I'm transliterating to English, right? And so I said, no, the Green Berets was this project that the U.S. had in Baghdad province near a town called Salman Pak. Now it's got enough crumbs to kind of regurgitate whatever's on Wikipedia, I think was where it went
or
to.
Maybe it doesn't regurgitate what's on Wikipedia. Maybe it just
right. It does look like it did something like that. Yeah, okay. And it's given me with that one little conversation. It has given me several thousand words of stuff to read through, right? Which can be powerful. The problem for me, if I'm going to use this in a combat setting, is I don't know how much of that is true. And I asked if it worked, and it's like, yeah, it seems like it worked. It did not work. But has anybody published anything worthwhile or sticky enough to compete with the idea of a co-op in a farm country in Iraq? And the answer to that probably is probably not, especially if it thinks that the queso paper is about Adventure Time.
And Pete, even if somebody did publish something about that, the effect it would have on the weights is so minimal. What you need to do is you need to be able to bring that in. You need to be able to bring that paper if you want to discuss. If you want to discuss ideas in that paper, you need to bring the expression of those ideas into the context window where it can most powerfully affect the generation of tokens. That's what you have to do. And that's, when you talk about like AI people will talk about retrieval augmented generation, RAG. And that's the idea of it. It's to go get a document that has stuff, flood the context window with it, and now generate from there. And that's the power of the context window. Like if I can put it there, then I can I can steer the conversation, but still it's not dealing in idea space. It's not dealing with the ideas that are presented there. It's dealing with expressions of the ideas. Two entirely different things.
Yeah, and it's interesting to think about how you could put tools together that would help you in the idea space, or just reimagine what you want AI to do, right? And if it was to, okay, so I guess the thing,
So
and we've talked about this in the
stop here.
past.
Let's wait. Stop there. Stop there. This is a very interesting point. And I think it's like, well, why doesn't AI? Okay, you're telling me AI doesn't do what we want it to do. Well, why don't we have it do what we want it to do? Well, why are LLMs current AI? And the reason that they're current AI that have captured our imagination is that they scale efficiently. They scale economically. Like you can take this program of predicting one token at a time in the context window, and we can scale that to, however many billions of dollars or trillions of dollars OpenAI wants to spend on data centers. We can move it from, it turns out we sort of started with a medium-sized data center, and then we kind of moved it up, bigger data centers, and we moved it down, so it was on my laptop a year ago, and now it's on this little device, that I don't have in hands reach. The MMOJO that I don't have in hands reach to, to put on the camera like the last show. But yeah, it's the reason that we use LLMs and we're talking about LLMs is because that algorithm does what it does very efficiently. That's why we do that. Right? So when you say, well, why can't we have AI that deals in idea space? We don't know how to do that. Like the closest thing we probably have is 3 generations of AI ago, which is the mid 80s and expert systems. That's probably the closest thing we have.
Yeah. Well, and that presents a problem for a lot of the way we're talking about AI right now.
Yeah, because we assume we can just plug in. Well, hallucinations are a bug. No, hallucinations are not a bug. Hallucinations are what the thing. It's what it does, and I don't even mean it's a feature in a positive way. I mean it's a feature in like lizards are scaly. Dinosaurs are generally green, right? I mean,
so this brings me back. This brings me back to ethics, right?
Yeah,
and ethics means a lot of things to a lot of people because you're talking about morals, social norms, all these things go into ethics. What some person thinks is ethical and they're right, another person thinks that it's not. Abortion is an ethical issue, and depending on where you come down on it is who you hate because they don't agree with you, right? So ethics are hard. It seems to me that, and this is the thing that I beat on pretty hard with when we were talking, Nick and I were talking, was that given the amount of mistakes we made when we were deployed before and all of the losing that we did, it's not professional to rely on a idea focused or non-idea focused automatic robot to chew up our information for us. It's because it can't reliably. That seems unethical to me. To push that up. It also seems unethical to me. This is not against Nick. That we would say, okay, we spent the last 25 years primarily losing, and now we're just not going to do that kind of fighting anymore. We're going to do other kinds of fighting that just involves murder and more missiles and more lethality, and act like that's going to be ethical. I don't know that that's ethical either. But more importantly, is it using your philosophy of computer science that you understand? Is it ethical to rely on AI as an answer to problems that we may or may not even have? I don't know. So I've loaded the question. So is there a problem with ethics and AI in a combat environment?
So this isn't really a computer science. I mean, it is informed by computer science. I would say it is. I mean, we have a strong ethic of, things are what they are. Okay. There's, if you tried to go to any philosopher's ethics, I know it's like really, I don't know, like, 90% of people are going to say, F you, Brad, for even bringing her up.
Right.
Ayn Rand's objectivism is, it's like, there's a mountain here. If you fly an airplane into a mountain, it's not going to go well for you because the mountain is. Okay. Yeah. Like this is an actual example that she gave to explain her ethics. You know, and this is stuff.
Mhm.
This is stuff that we really understand in daily life because we don't all fly airplanes into mountains or into buildings until
Right.
9/11, right? I mean,
Yeah.
they turned ethics completely upside, like the terrorists turned ethics completely upside down. What you could say that
Right.
they did, you know, again, this is gonna. I hope the clip thing doesn't take me totally out of context here. But what you could say that they did by flying airplanes into
Is it going to
buildings
be in the context window?
was
Then it is.
well, it is. It isn't anymore because it's going on too long. Was absolutely brilliant. Like it flipped our understanding of the world completely upside down to where we reorganized our society, we reorganized safety, we reorganized security based on
Give me that whole thing again right now, clean, without me interrupting you, and just say it as elegantly as you can.
Yeah. I'm going to invoke Ayn Rand. I'm going to invoke objectivism. I'm going to say that, okay, I know what y'all think. However, an example that she gave of ethics is we do not fly airplanes into mountains. This is a specific example. We don't do that because it doesn't end well for you. It ends fine for the mountain. It does not end well for you. That's why you don't do it. Existence exists. Okay? 9/11 comes along. We have these terrorists who fly airplanes into buildings. We had never imagined this before. It was absolutely brilliant. And I don't mean that in a good way. I mean, it's just genius in terms of you completely upended everything by doing it. You upended our sense of safety. You upended our sense of security. You upended our sense of, you know, like even just enjoying flying. Like that was so in terms of impact, it was genius, right? Well, we don't have the ability to just claim that things exist that don't exist. We don't have an ability to claim that things that don't exist actually do exist. So, oh, well, you know what? The AI makes mistakes now, but next version is going to be amazing. It's not going to hallucinate. No, absolutely. You can't say that because I can point to the algorithm. I can show you why it hallucinates. Like there's a reason. Right. There's a reason that has this problem. We have to look at those reasons. And that I think, you know, that should be the foundation of any ethic that you want to talk about LLMs and AI is, does this correspond with the reality of what they do? And if it doesn't, we can cut the discussion off right there. And I think for a lot of these things, like should these things kill people or whatever else, I think you can probably cut the discussion off right there.
Another aspect of this is consider the source, right? And so as much as I appreciate all the things that Elon Musk does, and I'm not an Elon Musk hater, I've invested in Tesla for a long time, but these guys are selling me a product and they're going to tell me that it's truth seeking or whatever all of these other dudes are saying, and they are selling a fucking product. I love, you can use Signal, it's secure because it has triple dipple encoded technology. And who invented that thing? Was it Eric Prince? I'm sorry, I just don't trust anybody. This is the counterintelligence agent in me. If you say, is this thing secure? I'm going to be like, absolutely not. Anything you don't want anyone to know,
don't tell anybody.
Don't tell anybody, and don't not tell anybody on the phone. Don't type it. Don't think it. Don't do anything, because it is absolutely compromised. Any information you create is compromised, right?
Yeah, any place you put that information is a compromised
The fact
place.
that you put it somewhere is information that can be used against you, right? Anything. You take a picture of yourself. There's enough computer smart people out there that they can have a robot look at where you are and be like, you are in Orange County, whatever, right? And they can figure these things out to a scary, especially if there's mountains in the background, a terrifyingly accurate amount of, like, if you and I took pictures with Mount Diablo in the background, I'd be like, Pete is in Benicia, Brad is in an asshole. But like, you can't believe these guys, right? I would never access this information. You all can't protect the information that you get. Sorry, we had a data breach. You got to do a better password. I'm the problem.
Let me make it worse for you. And like cryptography nerds that know what I'm talking about here. Give me any piece of information that you have. And I can make a converter, a one-time pad that turns it into the worst child porn that you could ever imagine. So that if I posted my one-time pad and nobody would know what it is, and they suddenly had your file becomes the key to that. Yeah. Now, how weird is that? Like, that's really scary. That is why if you have any information and you don't want it to be used nefariously, do not share it. Do not share it with anybody. We may have the most secure, we may have a provably secure connection between me and you right now. And if you're going to go and blab what I tell you, what's the point?
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah. And I don't want to get too distracted by this,
Yeah.
but and again, the counterintelligence agent me looks at these ads across the tunnel from you at BART, and it's like, we know how to secure your data. I'm like, I know how to get ass and titties in front of people. Your data is not secure for shit. I'm going to get you to talk. That's what I do, right? And if there's someone hell bent on finding these things out, you ain't stopping.
Find them out,
right? So when we look at the
up,
ethics,
they can make them up. Yeah,
absolutely. When we look at the ethics of all of this, and we look at the right and the wrong of all of this, I don't know that we're passing the test. Look, it's going to happen, right? Yeah. And if you recall, and this is just me getting more political and philosophical here, we were trying to save the earth by reducing carbon. Well, fuck that. There's AI. Now we have to have more energy than ever before. And Pete's principle is we will always consume more energy, right? Like that's just like you're adorable turning off your stove at night or whatever it is. You're a cute little baby with that. I appreciate you trying. You are irrelevant in the mass consumption of anything. I mean, the amount of energy Facebook by itself has consumed is quintatically bigger than anything
Let me tell you one of the things that's circulating on LinkedIn among the energy conscious, the environmentally conscious right now is you should not thank your chatbot for its answer because that is consuming extra energy that doesn't need to be consumed.
Right.
In actuality, when you actually go and you measure the energy and you see why it's not using a lot, and the reason it's not using a lot is because, you know, with each answer, with each question and each answer, the chatbot is caching its state. And so you saying thank you at the end is it's evaluating 2 tokens or 2 or 3 tokens, and it's generating, you know, maybe 10 tokens in response compared to 20,000 tokens it evaluated previously and 30,000 tokens it generated. There's more energy being used on the network connection between you, all the internet spots on the internet, the network connection between you, than in generating those tokens. And whether that's done in the cloud on expensive GPUs, or whether that's done on a MMOJO knowledge appliance, you know, sitting connected to your router next to your TV, right?
Yeah,
it's not. It's totally minimal.
And where do folks go for a MMOJO knowledge device and
you go
being able to?
Yeah, you go to mojo.net, MMOJO.net, and I'm rolling those out. It's a little slow roll, trying to get everything right with it, but I do use it all the time and have a good time with it. And you know, I hope you can have one too. And you know,
I have one more thing I want to bring up with you about technologies.
Yes.
One of the things that Grant and I were talking about, because I've seen it firsthand over and over again, and it's hard for us to realize individually, or as a unit. But when units come, they're ill prepared for the combat they're about to encounter, right? Mm-hmm. And so, and I'm just pointing at Nick because he made the example, and he returned with the exact ball I was hoping he returned with, you know. So we don't know what to prepare for. So we prepare for lethality. And that's very much a theme of this modern version of war under Secretary Hegseth. So when you don't prepare for the actual thing you're going to be doing, you do it poorly. And this all makes a lot of sense. And then Nick will say, but what if the tanks show up and you have to fight them and you haven't prepared? Well, first off, you're tankers. You are prepared. Maybe you're not heightened to a knife's edge, but you're not when you're there anyhow, because we're not expecting these tanks to come, but you've prepared. So we spend all of our time and effort in preparing for a fight we're not going to conduct, right? Mm-hmm. And instead of preparing for all of the thousands of conversations that we're going to have, and you know my general rule, or question I asked in the general rule is I will have more conversations in combat than I will fire rounds. Mm-hmm. And yet my training is 1,000x in the wrong direction. So when we take these principles and we think about our exercises that we train in, I'm fine. Let's fire tables for tanks. Let's do that. Let's work on our formation skills. Okay, great. I mean, there's plenty of training to do, right? Mm-hmm. But if you're going to do a lot of conversations, and you already know I'm a big believer on like be professional at working with an interpreter, but can AI help us build a scenario that's more all-encompassing, more spherical, based upon anything. Can you get it to say, hey, based upon the last 7 deployments in this area, here are the most common reports. Here's some things that you may want to train on, tasks that, and keep in mind, the entire time we're lying to ourselves about how successful we are, right? So can we use AI to help improve our pre-deployment scenarios that we train off of?
So the first question is, any question you ask an LLM, a chatbot, whatever else, it is going to give you an answer. Okay? They just, I mean, unless it's somehow been restricted from telling you, here, you cannot bury a body, go talk to the authorities, right? I mean, unless it's that's that, it's going to give you an answer. Now, the question is the answer factually correct? And I think we know that that answer probably is not factually correct from all the experience we have trying to get factually correct answers in various things from the LLM. We pretty much know that's not going to happen. So if we ask a question that depends on a factually correct answer, the answer is it's going to give us one. It's probably going to be bad. Okay.
Right.
If we ask questions, we ask it to do things where factual is not really, really important. I want to explore a scenario. I want to see this or whatever else. It might be pretty good. Maybe what I need to, maybe I say, hey, generate 50 scenarios based on all of this information I can shove in your context window. Okay. And then I take those 50 scenarios and actually have a human being sit down with each of them and say, this is plausible. This is plausible. This is plausible. This is half plausible. This is plausible. Maybe even pick out the top 5. I have a human being do it. Pick out the top 5 scenarios that seem plausible. That may be less expensive than sitting somebody down and saying, please, on your own, write a scenario that uses all this information and does this. So this is kind of this optimizing in front. How do I optimize this task in front and make it possible? Whereas it wasn't really possible before. I don't have Tom Clancy who can write this, or I don't have one of his, current ghostwriters who can write all these things for me. But I can take this information, I can dump it, and I can review it, see if it's good enough. And that might be a process we can use. The point is, though, is AI is one tool in this process. It is not the whole process. And that's how we have to think about it, is where can this help us? And where can this solve part of the problem? And where can it really solve part of the problem, which is usually generation, word explanation, word space explanation, rather than develop these facts, summarize, do these particular things. And know that it's okay that it can do kind of the fluffy stuff, but it can't really do the fact stuff. Know that that's okay. Right? It's like a shovel. Shovel's great at digging holes. Not so good for, what's it not so good for?
Facts.
I don't know. Yeah. Shovels are good.
A shovel, not good at hammering nails, could do it. But you're going to get a lot of...
Definitely not good at screwing in a screw. How about that?
Right. Yeah. It's not good for, well, it could be good for wiping your butt, but... it's funny. During the last 2 weeks, I've had a couple of shows based on military things. One was the guy named Tyler Gray. And I don't know if this was on the show or when he and I were talking offline, but when he was producing and directing episodes of SEAL Team on CBS, he's like, oh man, this gear you have is wrong, right? Because they're Hollywood people. They don't know the latest gear. Like, nobody uses an Edge Tech knife. We all use whatever, And so he knows the guys that have the stuff that's state of the art that the SEALs, and SEALs, like, they love their gear, right? They all do. We all love the gear that we have. But that matters, right? When you're trying to find this thing. And so creating that image, I don't know if AI would know that. Probably can't. But Tyler knows it because he's of that world. And so Grant was talking about how, hey, AI is helping me create slides and communicate in a conference room setting really well. And I can see that being the case. Like here in the context window, here's my quad chart that I wanted, because you have to do quad charts. And the quad chart has to really be 4 slides nowadays, right? It's very, the information is packed in super tight. And I can see how you can make a very sexy slide. There's a bit of a competition when it comes to slides in the military. And you can get good enough at using AI that you could have it do that slide in a fraction of the amount of time, because it's not driven by ideas. It's driven by this data that you're going to feed into the context window. I, before the show started, tried to get a SF guy with the drone, and then had like an iPad and another thing on it. And I got a lot of that, right? But it had the wrong helmet. I'm like, that's the wrong helmet. You have to
Right.
use a modern Special Forces helmet and put a set of headphones, big headphones on its head, pretty clear on what I wanted it to do. And it's like, how about the same picture again? Would you like that? I'm like,
Yeah.
no. And so I stopped because I wasn't going to fuck with it anymore. So I believe that you can make excellent PowerPoint slides to communicate ideas in the way that the commander likes. I believe that you can do that. And you're going to spend some time with the context window to build that. But that's a good way to use a shovel to dig a hole, maybe. And you might tell me now, like, I mean, people are doing this, right? So this does work in some form or fashion.
Yeah. I mean, you kind of work on the form of it. I think as we've talked about patrol reports, I've tried to tell you, hey, maybe I can sort of get the format of it right. Can't get the details. You're absolutely right about the details. I'm not even going to tell you. You can do the details. But maybe I can help you with a sample that, gets the format right. If you don't have the sample in your head or you don't know where to start, I give you a starting point or something like that. We started watching this show the other night. It's called, it's on Paramount Plus. It's called Lioness. And it's like Taylor Sheridan is the writer. He has lots of shows like Yosemite and yeah. Anyway, he's got lots of great shows, so that's why we chose. Of course, it's like this female engagement team, if you will, Middle East. Female engagement team is like this badass female soldier who's tasked with becoming like the best friend of a daughter of some important terrorist or something like that, right? And traveling the world and everything, and of course there's fights and all this shit. And one of the little details they had this scene where they dispatched her support team, half of her support team, to do some border support operation, and they have to kidnap an illegal immigrant who's caught and being transported by the sheriff, and they need to do this for CIA. So they're driving an old Suburban, okay, probably has point ignition, and dude sitting in the passenger seat has got an EMF device. And of course, I'm thinking, I wonder how real this is. I got to go look this up, see if this is real. But they did. Here's the thing. He did hit the EMF device and shut off the sheriff's van, which is, of course, the newer model. And of course, my thinking was, everybody who's been worried about EMF, the big EMF in the sky kind of thing forever, has always thought, okay, no electronic ignition, tinfoil the inside of your hood, and you're probably going to be okay. And like the science says that, right? So they got this detail right. I don't know if this device really exists or what it does. I'd be scared of it if I had a pacemaker, obviously. Right? I'm trying to do Will Riley voice right now, as I say that, right? But yeah, that's super important, right? You're trying to do a TV show, you're trying to do some kind of action thing, and yet those details are really important. AI is not going to get those details. They're not going to know that thing that's really important to you. And this gets back to my point at the very, very beginning. Those that can't automate or those that can't optimize, let the computer do it. It will not get the details that make it real. It won't happen.
Yeah. If you wanted to advise, I don't know, Pete Hegseth or even Nick Frazier on how to best use AI, like what's the closest fruit that they could just grab and be like, this works?
Yeah, so I think the ultimate thing is you got to evaluate everything. You need to know, does it work? Can I prove that it works by knowing what the algorithm does? If I know what the algorithm does, can I, in my mind, construct a way that it does the thing that I want it to do? The answer for all the things that are interesting right now is probably no. Okay? Generative things that are sort of creative and whatever else, it's going to do a great job with those. It's always going to do a great job with those. But the ethics of it need to start with, does it actually work? And if you can get past, does it actually work? Sky's the limit.
So you do need to use this stuff. And one of the things that Nick was suggesting was you need to sort of, I'll say, daisy chain them together. This one does this. This one does that. This one does this, and then you use them to improve your condition. Look, the Army will always stick more stuff in your uniform. Here's this protective plate. Right. Here's this blanket. Here is this, tourniquet. Here is this. And all of a sudden you're like, I've got, it's like a lady's purse, but outside of your clothes,
Right.
It's like you got everything.
But I'm not going to assume this does this. That's where I'm going to focus my energy. Does this really do this? Does that claim hold up? That's
Right.
what I would tell Pete Hegseth, and I think that's the
Okay.
I think that's that's smart skepticism, is what it is. It
And
comes from
then
a
he'd say,
skeptic point of view.
got to have that lethality,
Right.
and then you're
Right.
like,
Do you,
yeah, well, then don't use AI. Use a gun.
right. Right.
Not mocking Pete Hegseth, just mocking
No.
in general the how the military functions, and they get object fixated sometimes, and that's why we need critique. And that's why we need to think through these things and say, wait a second, this thing can't journey into a massive organization like the Department of Defense and gather all of the IIRs written, and those are information reports, and then say the facts are. It can't do that. It's not possible.
No.
Right.
Or this is the right decision to make.
Right.
People want to. There's this thing where people want to use AI as sort of this prop for authority. Like they don't have the balls themselves to say this is how I want this. So they will get an answer from an AI and say, well, this is what the AI said. And it's like Pete, when you start to recognize that in real people where they use props to like prop up their idea, and they don't want to tell you this is my idea and I stand behind it with my experience and my thought and everything else. Those are weak people. Get rid of weak people who do that. That'd be the other thing. Like people do that. They use this as a prop. Get rid of them. They're not useful to you.
Boy, Nick is right about this. The way we use language is pretty common. And so it's not that difficult to have a robot guess the next word that's going to come out of my mouth because we all talk in a certain style and cadence and everything. Okay, great. I got that. But when I'm listening to YouTube and I hear, I'm like, oh, that's an interesting title. Let me listen to that and see. Because I'm always trying to learn about YouTube. And I'm like, it sounds like an AI title. So I'll listen. And then I hear a script that sounds like an AI script. And then they can't say words like Bill Maher, right? Yeah. Any human who knows anything about Bill Maher knows that his name is Bill Maher. This is not a big leap. You're not trying to guess how to say Joe Koinski's name or Kowinski, right? You're not trying to do that because the guy's been dead for, almost 100 years now. This is Bill Maher, like Bill Maher, or whatever it is. And it's just the grade of the quality of these things is so low. And for whatever reason, it's detectable today where you're like, that is someone didn't do work for this and they're not going to get my time because my time is valuable.
I think if you could measure errors over a particular piece of time and whether it's somebody just like getting a little tongue twisted, pronouncing something wrong, maybe leading in with a little too much emphasis over something that needed more emphasis later in the sentence or whatever else. Like those are mistakes that humans make that the AI is too good to make. And you know as well as I do, like, you want to record a book, you do it in one shot, you're going to get like Adam Carolla's books, which are just full of like, they don't match the text at all. He just goes off, he doesn't, he's like awful. Or you're going to get something like very, very, very highly produced, like Matt Balliker's audiobook that I helped him with, right? We had to sit down and do takes of sentences because the guy who read the book for us was not, he was not going to put 3 paragraphs together in a perfect read, so there's production value, right? And when they feel like they have so much, when they feel so natural, but don't have production value in them, that's kind of when this is not real.
I'll give you a good example, and I don't want to be too critical because these just knock the ball on the ground and run fast and get to first base. So who cares, right? But Stanley McChrystal's current audiobook, which I'm reading right now because he's going to be on the show next month, he has that thing where he's talking, right? And you can tell he's talking and he's doing a long series of things, and then he comes back, and I'm talking up here now. And I'm like, oh man, it's constant, right? And this is just a nit to pick, but it doesn't have to you can absolutely fix that if you've produced a thing well, right? So I'm not saying a robot read this book. A robot would do maybe it would do a better job because it wouldn't get fatigued from talking.
I'm thinking a robot wouldn't do that. Yeah, that's the thing.
Yeah.
But that's
right.
I think that's stuff that we're going to key into to see, is this really authentic?
Right. And when there's like the circular thing, when they keep back and they keep burying the lead and burying the lead and burying the lead, like that's an obvious AI thing. The other thing that it will do is it can't say all the words. And so it'll, even if you say a word differently, like if I say oogle versus ogle or ogle, right? Whatever. We all know what I'm saying. It would say it in a way that you're like, what the fuck? That doesn't make any damn sense.
Could you imagine AI doing your affect effect thing?
Oh
Forget
my gosh.
it. Just forget about
yeah.
it. That's not going to work.
Yeah. Affect, effect. Yeah. Boy. Yeah. Ugh. Okay. All right. Well, this has been a long show, and I appreciate you talking about this stuff. It's interesting, and I think we continue to learn. And it seems like we're awfully negative about AI, and I would say that we're not. We're just more. I would call it the practical advocate. And a lot of this work you're just going to have to do yourself. And when you rely on AI, you're relying on something that makes a lot of mistakes, takes you backwards a lot of times. Yes.
And you're going to have to steer your expectations to doing creative things rather than analytical things.
Right.
If I want a new reading material for my kid to read at grade level every day that's relevant to them with things from their life, put in the context window, right? Have the AI generate stories. It's the best library ever. And you can do this on a little box, right? If I need
the MMOJO.
If I need, right, I should still have the box. If I need it to, do things that are mission critical for me and get the facts right, it just doesn't do that, right? So don't,
But for sure, have a guy like Nick go through all of it and study it and see what works and put it in the field. I mean, this is where it's positive. Like, it is great that the military is like, get this shit, break it, tell us what works, so we can put stuff out there to help warriors be warriors, right? But don't do it so they have more stuff to do.
Well, and also take the loss, right? Like, if it's not working, say, hey, it doesn't work, and maybe go back to basic principles and say, hey, why doesn't this work? Do we understand why this doesn't work already? Well, you're trying to do summaries and analysis that it doesn't do. That's a good thing to understand, so you don't repeat the mistake, right? But take the loss when you have the loss. Don't double down and triple down and 10,000 times down, hoping that you can make it better, because you can't.
Yeah. All right. Well, listen, I appreciate you coming on the show. Everybody, I hope you guys all enjoy that. I think I've got a show for you. Yes, I do have a show for us tomorrow. You guys are going to love it. Make sure you guys like and subscribe. I never say those words, but I'm told I'm supposed to say them. So if you guys didn't know how these things work, is you subscribe and then you find out about the show. So make sure you do that. More importantly, use the PayPal link at breakitdownshow.com. Click on that and put a couple of bucks in my pocket each month. That money actually helps me. I don't even care if you listen, but I do care if you put a couple bucks in the jar each month. That is way more valuable to me, because that is how you support artists directly into their pocket. And if you don't want to do that, you're just like, Pete, when you come to my town, I'll buy you a meal. Well, all right, let's do that then instead. Either way, I appreciate everybody out there. Thank you all so much for being part of this fun dance that we're doing. And Brad, I'll say goodbye to you in a second. Everybody else, ciao, ciao.